Hey YouTubers, and welcome to the second part of a three-part series that I'm doing currently on my channel, and that is basically what would the Saw horror franchise look like if it was rebooted and retooled to actually be kind of like a live action and or anime television series. And if you haven't seen it already, I did a discussion video with World King Kanji and World Queen Kanji about the essential elements that you would have to take from the original Saw series in terms of movies and how to boil those down to basically how you would make the television show. What characters to focus on, what types of things to focus on other than basically traps and gore, and kind of how you would progress the story. But I thought to take it a little bit further this time and actually kind of tell you my outline, my basic general outline of basically the first few things that you would really need to hit in terms of the actual series in order to actually tell the pilot episode of this series. And I hope that what I explain is something that kind of embodies the original content of the original 7 films while also expanding the mythology enough for a more long-form fluid narrative than the films ever were or even could be. So let's just see how this goes. We start off in a cold, dark room with a green tent. Amanda Young is tied up to a chair with a reverse bear trap strapped to her face, and while this might look familiar or be a retread from the original content, I assure you that it isn't. It's just that the reverse bear trap scene, or to an even greater degree, Amanda Young's character is such an integral part to the particular series and the story that I'm trying to tell, that there would be really no way of adapting this series without even including her or the particular trap that she was in the first place. But either way, I hope that you can really stay with me as I try to explain exactly where I'm going with this. So Amanda's just sitting there unconscious until the weight of the bear trap pulls her out of her sleep and she is greeted with a videotape of Billy explaining the rules of the game, which I'm tweaking a little bit. Instead of having Amanda be forced to kill her cellmate to retrieve the key from his or her stomach, I think it would be better for her to retrieve the key from her own body. You know, Amanda has this whole concept of cutting in the original series that I feel like wasn't really expanded upon, but was a really intricate part of her character, and we need to actually go on and try to expand upon that as we go forward, and also trying to not kind of walk on the whole concept of Jigsaw doesn't kill people, he gives people a chance. And this was always something that as a fan I had a really hard time actually kind of making make sense in my own head, so I don't necessarily want to retread on that. I would rather her just try to basically save herself by basically mutilating herself in the same context that she has been. Plus, this isn't necessarily something that's completely out of the whack for the entire series, it's just something that she's going to have to do. Anyway, Amanda would definitely be frightened by this prospect, but she would eventually break free from her bindings and sequentially start the same counter on the device. When she's unable to take it off by force, she looks around the room and sees a tray lined with surgical knives and a full-length mirror. Amanda uses the mirror to basically find the terribly sutured incision somewhere around her body. For dramatic sake, it can be really close to a major artery or something, but she basically takes the knife and shakingly cuts the wound open, severing the artery and beginning to bleed out. As she grabs the key and unlocks the device, throwing it to the ground and screaming, we hear the snap of the bear trap. Now here's where we get a little bit more creative in how we're setting up this scene and setting up the series in general. You see, from Saw 2 to Saw 4, Darren Lynn Bousman actually directed, and one of the cool things that he brought to the series that James Wan or no one else really brought forward him is the concept of basically linear time and the way that any scene was actually shot. He would have basically sets built next to each other so people could fluidly walk in between scenes in different time periods in the movie. This caused a lot of problems in terms of creative vision and fan kind of knowledge, or basically what was going on in any particular point of the series. But the concept is so creative that it's almost impossible to actually imagine Saw without that particular way of editing and filming in general. So it's actually something I believe that needs to be translated from the original movies to the new television series. So with that being said, I think the series needs to be set up with a loose flowing idea of basically past, present, and future, as the viewer is kind of taken in between any single one at any given time, based on the characters that we're following, be it the people in the traps, the cops, the people investigating, or Jigsaw himself. So without cutting, the camera moves away from Amanda and focuses on the bear trap for a few seconds before it's engulfed in white light and a camera shutter fills the silence. We move back from the bear trap to reveal a small investigation team looking through the room when Officer Allison Carey enters the shop. From there, we're following her as she surveys the area and makes notes to herself on her personal tape recorder. Stuff like, victim is a Caucasian female, mid-20s, history of drug abuse. And in the background, we see the forensic team struggling with the television VCR player, to which they tell Carrie that they actually got the tape out of the VHS player, and she tells them to put it in evidence immediately. Then she turns back to her tape recorder and suggests that while the circumstances are very similar to the 2 other cases that she's been working on, there's still not enough tangible evidence to actually suggest that the same person is actually committing these crimes. While she's still looking around, she bends down to kind of get a better look at the reverse bear trap. And in doing so, she realizes that these little red droplets start to land on not only her hands but also her tape recorder. And this all diverts her attention to the ceiling, where she sees a hastily written message in red paint that reads, "Look closer, Detective Matthews." This makes Carrie jump to her feet and run towards the exit, but the camera's already been one step ahead of her this whole time as it leaves the room and turns the corner to reveal Amanda struggling to make her way down the hallway, bleeding all over the place with her severed artery. When she does reach the exit, she pushes the door with all of her might and it floods the frame with white light until the image adjusts and we see Amanda passed out on a stretcher as the paramedics push her into an ambulance. An officer with the name tag Riggs steps into the doorway of the ambulance and calling for Detective Carrie to actually come look at this crime scene, as the ambulance door is shut and left in this black void until we hear the sound of a locker opening. And the blackness of the screen is pulled away and we realize that we're inside a locker as a young man named Adam Stanheight throws a pair of scrubs and grabs a camera from inside the locker and then closes it. So then once again we're actually on the move as we follow Adam as he makes his way outside of the hospital hallway. And as he walks to the main entranceway, he kind of deviates from the exit and makes his way behind the pharmacy desk. From there, he gets the attention of the woman behind the counter and flirts with her, even taking a couple pictures of her. However, all of these distractions are a bit of a ruse, as he uses these distractions to pawn off a few single bottles of painkillers. In the background, we hear a news report coming through the TV. The reporter is stated to be named Pamela Jenkins. Anyway, as Adam is charming his way into collecting all these free pills, or at least trying to, he is stopped in his tracks by a doctor named Lawrence Gordon who is standing on the opposite end of the counter. Dr. Gordon's presence stops Adam's advances and he pockets the small amount of drugs that he is able to get, and then makes his way out of the hospital, Dr. Gordon watching him like a hawk as he makes his way out. But as Adam leaves, an ambulance is rushed in and Amanda's body is pulled out. From here, ER doctors are basically going crazy as they try to fight to save her life until she's finally stabilized by a doctor named Lynn Denlin. But before anyone could thank Lynn for her work, she basically storms off until she's followed by a nurse. Now that's basically something that happens in the background. This scene is very much dedicated to actually showing that Amanda has survived her ordeal. From there we jump to the police station as Detective Carrie approaches Detective Matthews with the news of his name being found at the crime scene. Carrie goes on to briefly explain her theory about the relationship of the 3 separate extraordinary cases taking place over the last several weeks, with Amanda being the only surviving victim and the potential key to connecting the 3 cases. She even goes as far as to mention that the lieutenant might actually put more resources inside the case if Eric Matthews gets involved, because it's basically her working alone on this right now. But to basically no shock, Eric refuses to be a part of the investigation despite personally being called out by the criminal, as he basically boils it down to a long career's worth of grudges. Basically, he just doesn't think he needs to get involved, so Carrie takes it a step further and asking him personally instead of professionally. In doing so, she places his hand on his and lets it linger. Eric pulls his hand away from hers and refuses her again. So Carrie basically responds to this by storming out of Eric's office and berating him about not being the cop that he used to be. We then cut back to Adam as he walks into his shithole apartment. In the hallway, he sees a man by the name of Xavier waiting outside of his door. Adam tries to turn back before Xavier notices him, but it's too late. Xavier approaches Adam and greets him with a friendly yet authoritative manner. He then proceeds to question Adam about the lack of productivity as of late and accuses Adam of holding back on him. But Adam is quick to justify himself by putting the blame on a doctor at his hospital who has become suspicious of him, so it's harder for him to get the necessary product. But Adam assures Xavier that he's actually working on a plan to resolve these issues. As a peace offering, Adam gives Xavier the little amount of pills that he was actually able to get earlier, but just as a warning, Xavier takes Adam's camera from off of his neck and throws it on the ground and leaves Adam to pick up the pieces. From there, Adam walks into his apartment as we see him pop 2 pills that he was hiding in his pants pocket, and he lights himself a cigarette as he walks into the small bedroom that he's converted into a makeshift darkroom, where he grabs a nearby photo and pins it up on the wall to reveal a picture of Dr. Gordon. Then we cut back to Detective Carrie as she makes her way down the hall of the hospital. As she turns the corner, she is verbally assaulted by Pamela Jenkins, who insists that Amanda's case is part of a more elaborate murder spree that Pamela believes consists of at least 2 other victims. She asks Carrie for an official statement as nobody has yet discussed these connections. Carrie refuses to answer Pamela's questions, and she insists that the police department has not officially announced any connection of the 3 crimes. But Pamela actually pushes the subject further, asking Carrie if she believes these crimes are connected, to which Carrie takes a pause, but then she starts walking again. At the end of the hallway in front of Amanda's room, we see Officer Riggs sitting outside keeping guard. When he notices that Pamela is berating Detective Carrie, he steps in to help. He holds Pamela back as Pamela mentions that the other 2 victims were found with parts of their flesh cut out in the shape of puzzle pieces, a fact that had been withheld from the press. Now this is something that actually catches Carrie's attention as she looks back at Pamela. Pamela just smiles and says, "I'm calling him the Jigsaw Killer. Catchy, huh?" This comment leaves Carrie kind of shaken for a moment, but she basically turns in and walks into Amanda's room alone, leaving Riggs and Pamela outside. From inside the room, we see Amanda so weak that she's even barely able to sit all the way up. She's obviously still very weak and very twisted from her recent experience. Carrie introduces herself and takes a seat next to the bed. She starts off by asking Amanda to retell the events before she found herself in that particular situation. But Amanda refuses to answer the question, refusing to even look at Carrie or acknowledge her presence. Carrie pushes the subject a little further, asking Amanda to explain her experience in the trap. From here we see really quick flashes of the opening moments of the beginning of the episode, but Amanda continues to ignore Carrie's question. So by now Carrie is a little bit frustrated with the lack of respect, so she goes in for the killer blow, insisting that Amanda was placed into the trap due to her history of drug abuse and addiction, and suggesting that the person who put her in the trap was justified in his actions. Now it's important to note that Carrie doesn't necessarily believe this, she's just trying to get some kind of a rise or reaction out of Amanda in order to be able to speak with her going forward. Not the best tactic ever, but basically playing a bit of a bad cop situation for her to actually be able to talk to Amanda sometime in the near future. And this question is what really starts to shake Amanda. She looks at her self-inflicted wounds with tears in her eyes and then looks at Carrie for the very first time when whispering, "He helped me." Now this basically leaves Carrie with a bewildered expression on her face, as a perfect circle by The Outsiders kicks into full gear and the closing moments of the episode pass before our eyes. As the beat drops, we see Adam waiting his round in a sea of people in a lively nightclub. Out of the corner of the screen, we spot Dr. Gordon dancing with the woman from behind the pharmacy counter. Adam approaches them and snaps a few pictures of them before disappearing back into the crowd. Cut back to Carrie, who is now sitting at her desk surrounded by photos and documents of the quote-unquote Jigsaw case. A knock on the door reveals Detective Matthews with 2 glasses and a bottle of cheap whiskey. The 2 share a drink and go over the files together. Then we cut to a shadowy figure making its way into a dimly lit room where it repositions a small makeshift human-like toy in a redesigned dollhouse. In the background of the room, a silk-covered figure stirs itself to life as the figure moves towards it. Then we cut to black and start the credits as the song continues to play on. So I hope you guys like that. Obviously this is more of kind of a rough draft of an idea instead of a concrete solid idea for how a Saw series would actually kind of be laid out and everything. But I hope that you really enjoyed this idea, or at least you can kind of see where I'm going. I do hope that if you have enjoyed this video, you check out the previous discussion that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and also keep an eye out for the 3rd installment of this series where I'm going to be basically talking about individual characters and basically, in my opinion, the 2 main story arcs that you would need to actually really focus on in order to tell a proper series in the Saw canon and a more fluid-like television narrative over the course of, be it live action or anime, a couple seasons either way. I don't necessarily think, like I said in the discussion video previously, that this is something that can go on for 10 years. Obviously you need to go in with a distinct plan and everything else. Plus I do want to make it clear that while you're adapting these movies that primarily focused on twists and gore, that I think the obvious indicator of how to actually expand it going forward in more of a narrative sense would be to focus on the characters introduced instead of traps or twists or something like that. It's not that you have to get rid of them, it's just something that it doesn't need to be carrying the series going forward, because obviously that's what people are going to be looking for, and it won't be as, compelling as it could be otherwise. So as a fan, I am actually really excited to get this video out to you guys and kind of just share my interpretation of how I would really like to see a Saw series, TV series go for. If you're excited for Saw Legacy, Saw 8, or whatever you want to call it, make sure to tell me in the comment section below. Make sure to kind of share your opinions on this idea. What kind of idea would you put for a Saw television series, if you think that this is a good idea or something like that. Anyway, I really want to know. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more Saw news going forward. I will be covering the new movie as the news breaks and everything, or just my interpretations. But I really do hope everyone enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.